What if abundance isn't about what we have, but what our brain believes we deserve to hold? Most of us say we want more peace, more opportunity, more happiness, yet a part of us may still feel fear that we might never actually gain it, or even worse, gain it and then lose it. But here's something most people don't realize. Our brain can't expand until it feels safe. So when we think about change, right? So starting something new, asking for more, I don't know, even stepping out of like our smallness, our comfort zone, the brain's alarm system called the amygdala basically activates, right? And it's designed to protect us, not limit us, but it doesn't know the difference between danger and discomfort. So even when something good is coming, the same fight or flight feeling can still rise. If the amygdala keeps firing, it releases stress hormones, right? That narrows our focus. So we stop imagining new outcomes and we actually just start scanning for risk. Neuroscientists call this the scarcity bias, right? And this is the mind fixating on what could go wrong instead of what could go right. The shift starts with micro moments, right, of reassurance. So when we ground the body, we breathe slower, unclench the jaw, we pause before reacting. We're basically like telling the brain, hold on, you know what, we're actually safe to expand. So that message alone lets the prefrontal cortex, which is the area that handles decision making and creativity, basically come back online. If you're a person of faith, you could even pray that, you know what, when that old fear shows up again, we can ask God to actually steady us before we move, because peace is pretty much an active signal to the brain that, you know what, we're actually supported. So if we want to live abundantly, we need to start by teaching our body that, you know what, expansion isn't danger. It's okay. Like, we're allowed to expand and have an abundant life. So what's powerful is once safety becomes our foundation, growth stops feeling like a threat, right? And actually starts feeling like home. Okay, so next, I absolutely love this point, and it's basically the shift from, do you know what if it fails, to actually what if it actually works out. So when we picture taking a risk, right, for example, asking for that raise, applying for a dream role, sharing ideas, whatever it may be, the brain basically lights up in the same areas that respond to physical pain. So that's why fear feels really real. It's not all in our head, honestly, it's not. It's in our nervous system. So psychologists call this loss aversion. So we feel potential loss twice as strongly as potential gain, which is awful. So staying small feels safer than reaching higher, right? So even when staying small like hurts and we've outgrown it, we still do this. But here's the shift. Our brain learns through repetition. So when we keep imagining failure, those neurons wire together, right? And when we picture success, for example, new pathways form. So that's mental rehearsal, and that's a real studied process in cognitive neuroscience. So over time, imagining positive outcomes primes our brain to basically act more confidently when opportunities come. So next time a new idea makes us nervous, I know this is definitely me, we can actually just pause and ask, you know what if it actually works out? And picture that version of ourselves, grounded, capable, calm. So hold that image for like 10 seconds. You know what, that's more than long enough for the neurons that fire together to start wiring together. And it's not even about faking confidence, it actually isn't. It's about giving the brain evidence of a future it can actually believe in. So abundance basically grows where curiosity replaces fear. You know what if it works actually become like our real internal question. We stop preparing for loss and actually start preparing for increase. How cool is that? So next is interrupt the comparison loop. So comparison keeps the brain stuck in scarcity, right? So it activates the brain's default mode network, which is the same system that basically lights up during self-reflection. So when we scroll and compare, the brain's reward center briefly spikes and then it drops, right, leaving us emptier than before. So here's a stat worth actually like remembering. Social comparison can actually reduce self-esteem in less than 10 minutes of exposure online. 10 minutes, honestly, that's all it takes for the mind to shift from gratitude to lack. So we can literally interrupt it by asking, hold on, is this inspiration or imitation? Like, it's inspiration basically expands the brain's reward circuit through motivation, whereas imitation basically shrinks them through perception. So what I'm trying to basically say here is this, right? Abundance grows when admiration turns into action. So we can let what we see remind us what's possible, not what's missing. So abundance, I get it, but what if we can actually just redefine what enough actually really means? So abundance isn't necessarily the same as excess, right? Psychology shows that once our basic needs and autonomy are met, like happiness levels pretty much stay the same. So a concept called the hedonic treadmill, which basically means we adapt to more until more feels normal. If we chase constant upgrade, our brain never actually records arrival, right? Instead, we can decide what enough feels like in our body, which, you know what, can be peace, not stress, not pressure, just peace. So when the body relaxes, the nervous system signals safety, and that safety becomes the soil where gratitude basically starts starts to grow. So redefining what enough means doesn't limit us, it basically liberates us, because once we know we already have value, for example, everything extra becomes overflow. Okay, so developing an abundant mindset is important, and one of the easiest ways to kind of do this, building spiritual gratitude into your growth. So let me explain. Gratitude isn't just emotional, right? It's actually biological. So when we express it, dopamine and serotonin rise, strengthening the brain's pathways for joy and connection. But gratitude rooted in faith, yeah, that reaches even deeper. So it links contentment with trust. The neuroscience shows that regular gratitude, honestly, like practice, increases activity in the medial prefrontal cortex, which is the area of the brain linked to empathy and perspective taking. So it helps us zoom out from what's missing to actually what's working. But here's where spiritual gratitude expands it, right? So when we basically thank God before the outcome, we shift from control to surrender. That act calms the same fear circuits that anxiety feels. So we're saying, actually, I trust this purpose here, even if I can't see it yet. Okay, so what are some practical ways we can actually live this out, right? So we could start our day, for example, with one line of thanks for something unseen yet, or something we're hoping for. We could listen to gospel or worship music that reminds us that abundance isn't just material. And we could actually end the day like naming where we saw grace appear. So that could be in patience, favor, or even like the small wins. So psychologically, the pattern builds anticipatory joy, right? So that's a sense that good things are coming. Over time, the brain basically links faith with safety, so which is the foundation of abundance, in my opinion. So what's beautiful is gratitude doesn't necessarily mean we stop reaching higher. It means we rise with peace instead of panic. Turn micro wins into expansion signals. So the brain releases dopamine not only when we achieve big goals, but when it notices progress. I know, amazing. So every small win basically tells the nervous system, do you know what, we're moving. We can actually amplify that by celebrating completion instead of perfection. So finishing a workout, for example, or sending the email, even saving like £50, each recognition basically reinforces motivation loops in the basal ganglia. So pretty much the brain is able to build momentum through evidence. So when we track micro wins, we teach that growth feels good, not scary. So here's a wild fact. The average person makes around 35,000 decisions a day, and most are tiny dopamine chases, right? So scroll, click, buy, repeat. When dopamine spikes too often without rewards, the brain receptors down regulate, meaning it takes more stimulation to feel less satisfied. So that's why overconsumption leaves us restless. Real abundance restores our balance, so we can slow our inputs down, for example. Choose fewer but richer habits. We could walk, crave, read, create. Each pause basically resets the dopamine sensitivity and lets contentment basically catch up. Okay, so anchor in the present. Abundance basically begins now, today, right now, not tomorrow, now. So the fastest way to feel abundant is to come back to the present, to come back to now. So when we replay the past or overplan the future, like I know so many of us do, the default mode network becomes hyperactive, and it basically pulls energy away from the sensory regions that notice life is happening. So mindfulness isn't a trend, it's actually like brain training, you could call it, for example. So research from Harvard basically shows that our minds wander about 47% of the time. Anchoring in the present basically re-engages the insula, which is the brain region that tracks body awareness. So when we focus on breath, texture, or sounds, for example, we're able to bring the mind back home to safety. So that's abundance, presence without panic. We can literally build tiny anchors through the day, like a warm drink, for example, before our emails, or a 2-minute pause before replying to something, and just sunlight on our skin. And spiritually, I just feel like the present is often where we hear like quiet direction. So when the noise fades, God's guidance feels a lot clearer, right? You know what, we may just be able to finally listen properly. So what's powerful is abundance lives in minutes, not milestones. So when we honor the moment we're in, for example, the future stops feeling like proof we're behind and basically just starts feeling like promise. Okay, so next, let's talk about energy, because it is important when you are trying to have an abundant mindset. So here are 3 things that I do and I'm really like focused on. So first, I order my inputs, because what we watch and hear shapes mirror neurons in the brain. So I try to choose voices that stretch my thinking. Next is proximity. So proximity matters, and you know what, the people around us basically influences our baseline expectations through social contagion. So I try to stay close to those who normalize growth, for example. And third is my environmental cues. So a tidy space, for example, a playlist, images of things I really love one day, basically all signal abundance to the subconscious. So ultimately, the more we witness what we want to witness, the safer it feels to live it. Next is something that I'm a firm believer of, and that's giving. I don't necessarily feel like you can have an abundant mindset and not also understand that giving is a part of that. And I remember when I was in church once, the pastor used a really good example. She closed her hand and she basically said, if your hand is closed, how is God meant to really give you anything or put anything in there or to trust you with any resources? But if it's open, it's a flow, right? You're constantly giving, God's putting more stuff in there. You're blessed to be a blessing. Basically, giving resets scarcity. So when we give like our time, kindness, money, the brain's reward centers lights up in the same way they do during joy or connection, for example. So in behavioral science, this is called the helper's high. So it acts of generosity basically release something called oxytocin, which reduces stress and increases trust. So when life feels tight, we can still give something small, honestly, a message, a compliment, an idea. Each gesture basically just tells the brain, you know what, there's more where that came from. Generosity doesn't take away from abundancy. It doesn't. It's basically just proof that, you know what, we already have enough to share. Final point is steward what we have and let's just trust God with the rest, because true abundance, in my opinion, is stewardship. So it's caring for what we have whilst trusting God with what's next. So when we manage our resources, money, time, energy, intentionality, the brain's executive network activates. It rewards planning, order, and follow through with a quiet sense of control. So that calm confidence becomes the opposite of scarcity. But stewardship isn't just like spreadsheets and strategy. It's not. It's spiritual. So it's saying, actually, I'll honor what's in my hands and let God handle what's beyond them. That surrender basically stops the endless loop of, do you know what if it runs out? Psychologically, this actually aligns with internal locus of control, which is basically the idea on the belief that while we can't control everything, our choices matter. So people who practice it show higher well-being and resilience. So for example, we can live it by checking in weekly, right? So what did I nurture this week? Where did I waste my peace? Small reflections basically turn awareness into action. So when we pair discipline with faith, abundance stops feeling like chase and starts feeling like trust. We don't manifest abundance, we don't, but we manage it, right? I feel like when God sees that, you know what, he can actually trust us with little, he'll like multiply it and trust us with much, in my opinion. You know what, abundance isn't a destination, it's a way of thinking. It's the quiet confidence that we basically can hold more without losing our peace. If you enjoyed this video, check out the Wellbeing guides below and I will see you in my next one. Bye.